Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we have ourselves a track from an act named Hollywood Video Game Killbot titled Feeling Great Today. And if we switch over to here we have ourselves a track on Spotify and we're going to listen through it from start to finish and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go! In a twisted way, it kind of works. Like, it's very alternative, but it's, you know, that's not a bad thing. I mean, like with a name like Hollywood Video Game Killbot, you kind of get the impression that this might be something a little bit out of the box, and I kind of like the fact that we're attempting to be creative like this, you know, with textures that wouldn't necessarily go together well. Is this meant to represent their personal feeling great today? How it feels for them? Are we working with some polyrhythms here with various elements? I mean, it kind of sounds like the kind of music you might find in a dream sequence in an edgy horror film, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I think that there's definitely a time and place for this kind of music. We've got some interesting guitar loops as a sub-layer as well. Yeah, okay. Alright, let's talk about this one. I'm assuming there were some loops involved with this that were intertwined together. They sounded, because we had similar phrasings from different instruments that repeated and intertwined with one another. We'll talk about that in the conclusion. And welcome to my conclusion of this track, my review of it, a track named Hollywood Video Game Killbot titled Feeling Great Today. Let's just take the title literally and discuss that really quickly. I mean, I think that this is potentially their instrumental attempt at describing how they feel, whether it's a serious thing. I mean, I'm going to assume it is. It could also be kind of like more of a kind of testy kind of feeling great today. It could be almost like menacing with like the undertones of the wubs and stuff like that. It could just simply be having a lot of energy. It's very open to interpretation. There's a lot going on with it. The composition itself with the layering is very, very intense. But if we're asking, does this kind of mirror the concept of feeling great today by virtue of the... Or maybe it's like literally talking about like the first point of view, the perspective of an actual killbot, of a robot discussing whether they feel great today. Maybe this is the robot telling us the story without having actual words to go along. Maybe I'm kind of digging too deep into the source at this point, but regardless, do I think this could represent feeling great today? Yeah, probably could. I think the lack of vocals does it a favor simply because with music that is this kind of surreal in the way that things just kind of melodically, scale-wise, harmonically, they just don't really resolve. It's very much a situation where we're trying to avoid the root note at all costs and we don't necessarily feel the need to resolve the melodic tendencies that we have within each track, the little sequences and themes and motifs. Again, as I mentioned, it simply seems like we've gotten a whole bunch of different loops, and we have carefully and constructively, and I think quite efficiently, stacked them within each other in a way where it makes musical sense. I think that the taking away and re-entering of those drum patterns was fantastic, and I really enjoyed the 16th note grooves that we had there, the mixtures of those closed hi-hats with the kicks and the snares and stuff like that. I thought it was fantastic. The percussion was tight. For a 2-minute 37 track to be right within that 2 to 4 minute sweet spot and be compelling the entire time despite a clear story or a clear narrative, without hand-holding, with there still to be differences and changes in sections despite not really particularly trying to have different motifs within it, is impressive. I think part of the selling point is the strangeness of like the actual music itself, in the sense that it wasn't that we had different textures that might not necessarily go well together or be typical in certain genres related to it, because I think that you should be able to put together whatever kind of things you want, and I think a limitation, unnecessary limitation when people are musical or creating music, is thinking, hey, this instrument only should go with that. So I don't necessarily mind the fact that we've got like dubstep synths with really sparkly ones with like the guitar riffs and stuff like that, which don't, it's just, I wouldn't have expected that kind of guitar riff to be there with that dubstep synth. It's just not something style-wise that I'm necessarily used to. But then if that's the beauty of being creative, is simply, it's not just the musician themselves, Hollywood Video Game Killbot, enjoying the tone of what they're saying, the overall vibe and atmosphere. Maybe the strangeness is that feeling great to you. Maybe it's strange that they do. This is making me think. The music basically encourages you to consider what could possibly be making them feel great today. That's an effective piece of media. There was dynamic range to this, and even when we had modulation or various ways of like exploring the different arpeggios that we put forward, which would indicate an understanding of music theory and composition. How do I describe it? It's almost like it was all preconditioned and all carefully planned out despite the chaos involved there. That production studio-wise is fantastic as well. It's really compelling. Part of what also makes it interesting is the unpredictability of it as well. Simply, you've got so much that happens within that first sort of 30 seconds of the rest of the 2.5, you're wondering what's going to happen next. That encourages people to not be apathetic, which is actually incredibly important. Sometimes when you have a track that is too typical of the genres that it's typically associated with, or too sort of similar to a lot of other types of music, you can always become apathetic as a listener because of the fact that you expect things to happen a certain way. So when they don't, it encourages you to pay attention, and that's really important. I think with that considered, the theme there I don't really think we decided on a specific idea aside from the direction and the switching of the different triads. I don't know if we ever found a place where the music could sit and kind of be comfortable within itself. We had, again, bass lines and drum patterns that came in occasionally. It was almost like we could have made ourselves a single which could have simply just been instrumental without vocals alone. The drum patterns, the synth lines, where there were some really beautiful sounds from those synth leads that were nice and sparkly, they notched nicely with the instrumental layering there. And we had careful development of the theme as we went through. We didn't have too much of the same thing. We didn't just sit there and kind of rest on our laurels there and expect the listener to be satisfied by a little bit. We had more and more instrumental parts added as we went on throughout the track, and considering it wasn't that long and we had so much going on, especially at that bell curve, it was still, it was good. I don't know if the song would have been improved if we had variations with the various sort of loops or individual instrumental ideas. I think that once you kind of associated that you were having repeats of concepts there, and now are coming in at times which were sort of like pre-associated with other bits that you had before, it almost felt comfortable despite how initially unusual it might have been. I'm happy with the way that we wrote it, even if it was very, very experimental in regard, and it wasn't necessarily something that I think every single listener, I can imagine there'd be people who may feel alienated by listening to this simply because it's very differently written to a lot of the music that maybe they get mainstream attention from, but I think there'll be a niche of people who listen to it and enjoy it because of how out there it is. And the weird thing is that I still can't quite place it because it's like spacey and trippy and psychedelic. I still can't tell whether it's the robotic angle, like a robot interpreting music, or it's the angle where we're trying to make it just almost like I don't know, like I'm trying to sort of go back to what I was talking about with the various song meanings before, but I think I don't want to sort of like loop myself too much. The studio recording, mixing, and mastering was solid. We didn't have any issues with it. It's just often when I have people use loops and they put songs forward and they're semi-directionless and it's more of an ambience, a vibe, I find that often that is accidental. But with the level of studio production and the quality of it, as well as the leveling and stuff like that, I can't help but feel that this was all on purpose. I feel incredibly unsure of how to really interpret it. You know, like there were no resonant frequencies, so the frequency spectrum notching was good. Everything was nicely placed there. Things were nice and wide in the stereo field. Things kind of flipped around the place and went from the red to the right side of the headphones. So the music felt huge and it had a lot of life and vibrancy to it. And there was a nice wide range of different notchings of things and leveling of the mix, but it also just, you know, it was satisfying because I think that if you'd had a more traditional verse chorus structure, or even something more progressive, if you'd simply had a motif that wasn't as kind of like strange sounding, this could have been like commercial grade mixing without hyperbole. I don't think the song needed vocals. I think it was just me, sort of like an ambient vibe that you kind of sat in and you just absorbed it and accepted it. There were no issues whatsoever with the presence of any of the various instruments in the mix, and it was nice and loud without pumping with fun dynamic range there. Things weren't the same loudness the whole time as I mentioned before in the terms of the arrangement. And I feel a bit confused, but this is nonetheless my review of this track from an act named Hollywood Video Game Killbot, titled Feeling Great Today, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go check out their various social medias and Spotify page. Stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world, and I'll catch you all in the next review. Spiderhands out.